I'm Mike Allen, co-founder of Axios, and welcome to Axios House Chicago. Huge shout out to my Axios Chicago colleagues who have created such great coverage here and have built the great community that we have here, thanks to the incredible Axios events team who pulled this off in this amazing space. Welcome my longtime friends, the Sullivan family, are here. Welcome to Axios viewers around the world for joining us. We appreciate your joining this conversation in this incredibly historic week. We're excited to be spending it with you, and thank you for joining Axios House. We're here till 8 p.m., so if you want to avoid the lines at the United Center, you can drink and eat on Axios, and we'd love for you to watch the events here. Our guest today has been a leader in Chicago's public, private, legal sectors for decades. She's known the Obamas since before they were married. She is now CEO and a board member of the Barack Obama Foundation. She was senior advisor to President Obama from 2009 to 17. That is every single day that he was in the White House. Fun story. She told me that she got to the White House before the parade was over, and she waved goodbye when they got in the car with the Trumps to go to his inauguration. So she was in the White House longer than President Obama was. Stanford undergrad, law degree from the University of Michigan Law, author of the New York Times bestselling book, Finding My Voice. Valerie Jarrett, welcome home. Thank you so much for joining Axios.
Thank you, Mike. Hello, everyone. You're supposed to say hello back. Welcome to Chicago, best city on earth.
That was a great President Obama thing when the crowd would say, "We love you," he'd always say,
"I love you back."
So we have a great Chicago audience here in person. And Valerie, you have a date in Chicago every Sunday night.
I do, with my mom, who's 95, almost 96. We've been having Sunday dinner for as long as I can remember. I'm an only child, but I got a huge extended family. And so particularly on a day like today, a beautiful summer in Chicago, nothing like my mom's backyard. I know, it's pretty nice.
So you came to Chicago at age 5. You worked for Mayor Richard Daley. You've seen Chicago grow. You've been part of its growth. Put this moment in perspective for Chicago. This convention, this moment, the incredible candidacy that is launching here. What does this week mean for Chicago?
Well, it's a great opportunity for us to showcase a magnificent city. It looks spectacular. It is an engine. Having worked for a mayor, I do believe that our cities are the economic engine of our country. They're the vitality of our country. They represent the rich diversity of our country. And this is my third convention in my lifetime in Chicago, 68, 96, and now. And I think we're getting better each time. Yeah, thank you, yeah.
So when David got to talk with David Plouffe earlier, and he was talking about how there is here at the Democratic Convention in Chicago, as people get ready for the nomination of Vice President Harris, he and others have said that there is 2008 energy. We were talking backstage. My nephew, Tate Erickson, is here. We were kibitzing, and I said, when people talk about 2008 energy, do you get jealous? And you said,
no. I mean, a big part, I think, of President Obama's legacy is that he believed in the hopefulness of our country, that ordinary people could do extraordinary things. He believed in freedom. He believed in everything that you're hearing from Vice President Harris. And so, in a sense, it's a continuation of the hard work he began, except, you think about it, Axios didn't exist back then. Social media wasn't the way it is. And so we had a lot of energy on the ground back in 2007, 2008. And that is what's happening now. But it's also happening on all these different platforms, and I think it's magnificent. So we have nothing but joy and enthusiasm for what's going on right now. Young people today who are picking up that baton and running with it is all President Obama would have ever wanted.
And that's a big part of the Barack Obama Foundation mission.
What a nice segue. Thank you. into my day job. So yes, so our mission is to inspire, empower, and connect people to change their worlds. And we would invite anyone who wants to take a short trip, 15 minutes down Lakeshore Drive. You can see coming out of the ground the museum, but it's going to be a whole campus. It's 19.3 acres in the middle of Jackson Park, right on the lakefront, next to the Museum of Science and Industry and the University of Chicago. We'll have a forum building with an auditorium, music studios, a Chicago Public Library, so our young people in the community will feel welcome to come in and read, an athletic center, walking trails, vegetable and fruit garden like Michelle Obama had in the White House, and just a great amenity. And so we have a museum campus downtown, and now we're going to have one on the south side.
Story time.
Oh, story time.
It's
Yes.
1991.
Story.
A Miss Robinson comes to you for advice. Do tell.
So in 1991, I had just been appointed Deputy Chief of Staff to Mayor Daley. And I was staffing up the office, and someone sent me a resume, and across the top, it said, Michelle Robinson is a brilliant young lawyer, has no interest in being at a big law firm, and would like to explore public service. Well, I had been at a big law firm and had no interest in that, sorry to anybody here who's at a big law firm, and wanted to give back to the city I loved. And so I called her up. I said, please come in for an interview. She blew me away. I still remember how she walked in, shook my hand, looked confident, and she's like 26, 27 years old at the time. And instead of telling me about Princeton undergrad or Harvard Law School, she told me her story, which is the quintessential American story, which I don't have to repeat because you all know it. And the thing, though, I will repeat that she said that day that I'll never forget was that I said, why public service? I was motivated because I'd had a daughter, and I was always so proud of my mom who worked, and I thought if I stay in this law firm, my daughter will never be that proud of me. I need to find some purpose and passion. And I said, look, I left because I was a mom and I wanted my daughter to be proud. Why are you considering leaving? She said her best friend and her dad had died in the prior year. And it was such a wake-up call. And she said, I need to find purpose and do something with my skills where I'm giving back. And I said, well, do it right here. And I offered her a job on the spot. I had no authority to offer her a job, but I thought, who could turn her down? And I talked to her a few days later, and I said, well, and she said, I got bad news. And I said, what? She said, my fiance doesn't think it's such a great idea. I said, well, who's your fiance, and why do we care what he thinks? And she laughed just the way you are, and she said, well, he started his career as a community organizer, and Mayor Daley isn't necessarily the person he would think he would want me working for, and so he wants to know who's going to be looking out for me. And I told him, you, and would you have dinner with us? And in retrospect, quite wisely, I said yes. And that was 33 years ago this summer, 1991.
And you've been
I know,
on
wow. Decades.
No, it's amazing. So you have been part of the Obama's personal and professional life as they started, where you were talking about here, to when they became some of the most famous people in the world. Tell us about that journey.
Well, so I did go to that dinner, and at the end of the dinner, I said, Mike, two things. One, I thought that they would be married forever. Why? You just could feel the love and respect. And people have often said, well, why did she need her fiancé to approve what she was going to do? But having been there for every professional decision he's ever made, he never made a single one without her there. So it was really more of a reflection on their partnership. The second thing I thought at the end of dinner, because I asked him, well, what do you want to do with your life too? And he expressed an interest in public service. And I just thought, you're so just committed and smart, and you love Chicago, and you two are such an amazing couple. I bet one day you could be mayor of Chicago. So needless to say, as he reminds me quite often, he exceeded my expectations. And I pinched myself. We flew in yesterday, and I said to them, this is going to be so much fun to be back in our hometown. And here you guys are, two like the most popular people in the world. And they're like, it's hard to believe, right? I said, yeah, it is really hard to believe. But I think part of why it has been so magical is that, and Michelle Obama said this in the 2012 convention speech. She said, people often say to her, has being president changed her husband? And she said, no, you are who you are, but it has revealed who he is. And what I would say over the last 30 years, I've been so amazed to see revealed what kind of human beings they are, and their core is absolutely the same as it was the day we had dinner.
I've feel like they enjoy their lives. You were talking about that moment when they said, hard to believe, President Obama, I definitely could say he loves being Barack Obama.
He's very happy. Someone once told him that there is no better job than former president of the United States of America. And I will say, you know, people say, well, do you miss it? And I say that the two of them are so forward-looking, and they're still relatively young. And what gives them pleasure is seeing the next generation of leaders mature. And part of the mission of the foundation is to help people, regardless of party affiliation or even subject matter interest, give them the tools that they need to go forth and change society and our world. And we have programs in the United States and Asia and Africa and in Europe. We help boys and young men of color. We help adolescent girls stay in school. We have a scholarship, thanks to Airbnb, for seniors and juniors and seniors in college to go and travel during their summers. And all of this is to just empower that next generation. And so coming full circle, seeing someone like Vice President Harris, who President Obama has now known 20 years, back when she was, you know, a DA in San Francisco, and to see what's happened to her career and to be able to help her in any way he can, wow, that's just as good as it gets.
So just as you took a chance on Michelle Robinson, somebody who took a chance on me, Gail Shea was the Shenandoah bureau chief of the Richmond Times-Dispatch when I was a college student, and helped me learn journalism. She's watching right now from Plum Lake, Wisconsin. And she has been a long, long time admirer of her. I said, what should I ask Valerie Jarrett? Here was her question.
Uh-oh. Be nice, Gail.
You were at the right hand of the president for 8 years in every possible situation. What does it take to do the job? How do you know Vice President Harris is ready?
Well, it takes a lot. It's a hard job, let me tell you, if you do it right. So first of all, you have to do it for the right reason. It's not about you. It's about service. You have to be able to absorb pain, because no matter what decisions you make, somebody's going to be unhappy. And so you have to have a sense of true north. And what's your true north? You have to listen. I think leaders who don't listen are not really effective leaders, because you're leading people who are voting for you, and you have to understand what are their hopes and their dreams. You have to be curious, both intellectually curious and emotionally curious. You've got to be willing to say, I made a mistake. You got to be willing to change your mind. And you have to have courage. It is not for the faint at heart, and particularly in our current environment. And you have to surround yourself with people who will tell you what you don't want to hear. And I think part of my job when I worked for President Obama, because I had already known him so long, I was only motivated by just trying to give him my best advice, informed advice. Do your homework, pick a team around you that shares your values, but will push you and help you think outside the box and check you when they don't think you're right, but ultimately will support you in the decisions that you make. And I think that Vice President Harris has all of those same qualities. And there is probably no better training ground to be president than being vice president for 4 years, and being vice president to a president who, as President Biden said last night, the best decision he ever made professionally was selecting her. And so to have that kind of a relationship where you're in the room and the last voice, and do that for 4 years, not to mention the track record of her career before that, I can't imagine really how she could be any more prepared to be president of the United States than she is. You agree? I hope you agree. You better clap enthusiastically.
You get the crowd going.
I was going to say, we got to not only agree, but we got to work hard.
So we were chatting backstage with our mutual friend, Michael Feldman, and he was making the point that Vice President Harris has enjoyed an enviable month of ball control, an incredible month where she was, as the cover of the New Yorker, which you saw on Axios AM, showed the roller coaster going up for Vice President Harris and Governor Walz. But Valerie, you've been there. You know that doesn't last. President Obama's great expression, he'd always talk about, it's going to be our time in the barrel.
Well, so our time in the barrel began, if you will remember, when President Obama won the Iowa caucuses. Those of you who are old enough to remember that. We thought, oh my goodness, and we are going for gold. And we go into New Hampshire, and we are way ahead of the polls. And I remember one of the advisors, President Obama, said, you know, campaigns are a roller coaster. We're up now, but we'll be down. And we're like, we're just going to roll the deck. And of course, New Hampshire was a devastating defeat. But out of that, people found out who he was. And yes, we can came out of that terrible experience. And it forced us to have to go to many more states and introduce him to many more people, and in the end it was actually good for us. And so there will be a whole multitude of tests. She is absolutely on a roll right now, and I think it's a pent-up enthusiasm. I think people are they're tired of all the negativity, the polarization, the toxicity. I think when Governor Walz said, she's full of joy, people want joy. They actually want to like each other. They want to know their neighbor. They want to feel a responsibility. And I think that they're seeing that in the two of them. And so, yes, I'm sure that there will be, it's a short campaign. It's a lot shorter, certainly, than ours was. But there will inevitably be things that go wrong. And I think that's an opportunity, because you see what people are made of, not when things are going well, but when times get tough. And I have every confidence in the two of them and all of the people who will surround him that will help keep pushing them forward.
Earlier, you mentioned leadership. We have a lot of leaders in this room and watching. We have a lot of rising future leaders, including Tate back there. What is something that you've learned over your years as a leader, community, corporate, political, legal, philanthropic? What's a leadership lesson that you pass on to young people?
Just never lose sight of why you're doing what you're doing. And for me, the reminder is being around the people whose decisions, the decisions you make, whose lives are going to be affected by those decisions, and staying in touch and realizing that ordinary people do extraordinary things. And so maybe, Mike, I'll share with you, I was in San Francisco doing my book tour, and after the book tour, I always say, particularly to the young people in the room, every one of you can make a difference. And it can be in your own community. And I always recommend people start local, because you know the community and they know you. And I said, so do something in your lives to be a part, to be a citizen, to be an active and engaged citizen. And a woman came up to me afterwards and she said, I want to tell you what I do. And I said, what do you do? And she was like an older woman in San Francisco, looked a little like you would imagine an older woman in San Francisco might look. And she said, I comb through the newspaper and I look for naturalization ceremonies within a bus ride of my home. And then I get my ironing board, and I get on the bus, and I go to the naturalization ceremony. And I'm like, where are we going with this story? Where's security? And she said, I put my ironing board out in front, and when people come out of the naturalization ceremonies, I register them to vote. And so I say, if she can do that on her own time, with her own ironing board, then everybody can do something. And just think of, and this is like 7 years ago, imagine how many people she has registered to vote since then. That's what one person can do. And I think leaders have to keep that in mind. And so anybody can make a difference. You don't have to be the President of the United States to do something good.
Question about President Obama's leadership or management style. I'm hoping to get a very practical tip from you. I'm going to prime the pump, and you can correct me. As I recall, one of President Obama's hallmarks was if there was a meeting, a group of people, if somebody hadn't spoken, he would call on them. You can correct that, modify that, but what is something that would benefit our guests today that you learned watching President Obama in action?
So if you are a leader, there is immediately a power discrepancy. The people who work for you came to work for you because they think you're pretty smart. And when you're the President of the United States and leader of the free world, everyone thinks you're pretty smart. And they think you probably know all the answers, and you don't. And so one of the things that he would do to level that playing field, and you know, Mike, from the White House, say the Roosevelt Room, it's very hierarchical. The cabinets sit around the table with the senior staff, and the people who really did the hard work are on the back bench, we call them, backbenchers. And he would be engaged in conversation, let's say, and you have to read your audience. This is something else that, it's not just enough to be an expert and read your documents, all of which he did every night. You have to be emotionally intelligent and be able to look around the room and see, you can tell by somebody's expression if they have something to say. And the people in the back are just like this, and they know the answer. And he would look around the cabinet member and he would go, well, what do you think? And if you were to say, well, I'd actually disagree, then you'd get the full Obama, and he would lean in and he'd go, well, tell me why. And he would lower his voice and he would do all these things to make you feel comfortable pushing back. And he also never said what he thought at the beginning of the meeting, because then everybody's going to fall in line. And you would try to listen. It's like the Supreme Court oral arguments. You would try to figure out, well, what does he think by the questions? And sometimes he was just asking those questions to be contrarian and to see where you would go with it. And so I do think that those of us are in positions where people look up to you. If you want to get the best out of your team, you have to make them feel comfortable telling you what they really think, particularly when they disagree, especially when they disagree with you.
You just used a very memorable phrase. What is the full Obama?
The full Obama is when you just know you have his undivided attention, and he's curious and he's interested in hearing you. And I'll give you a story to exemplify this. We were debating whether or not to bail out the automobile industry. And I won't give you all the details, but enough to know. And all of the senior economic team and senior advisors are in the Oval Office. And President Obama is pushing us and pushing us and pushing us. And we all agreed on what he should do. And he said, does everyone agree? And we said, yes. And he said, do your teams agree? Exactly. And one of the senior members of his staff said, well, actually, one of the members of the Council on Economic Advisors doesn't agree. And so he said, well, why is he not in the room? We waited for 10 minutes for that staff person to run from the old executive office building to the Oval. He walks in, imagine that look on his face. All the bosses are there. And President Obama says, I hear you don't agree. But he said it really nicely. He said, tell me why. I really want to hear what you have to say. Well, by the time he collected himself and was no longer hyperventilating from the run across the street, he made a very cogent argument for why he was right. Now, ultimately, the president agreed with us. But imagine how empowering it was for that person to know that the president didn't want to make a decision until he had heard from him. That's leadership.
An incredible night tonight in the night of our country and of Chicago. The former First Lady, the former president are coming back to their hometown to address the Democratic National Convention. We'll start with the First Lady. What will her message be?
Well, I think that having been married to the president, she knows very well what it takes. She knows Vice President Harris very well. So I think it will be a personal message, and I think it will be one of why this is an opportunity for us to be joyful and get engaged again and be enthusiastic again and work hard again, knowing that there will be, as you said, Mike, those roller coasters ahead. And I think the president will talk again in personal terms about what it takes to be president in this moment, and what he's prepared to do, and that this is an all-hands-on-deck moment where we all have to get involved. I think one of the lessons we certainly should have learned, it's not just enough to elect a president. You also have to stay engaged throughout the term of their presidency. And sometimes you elect a president, you go, okay, I'm done, and you go back to your job. And that's not the way democracies work. And our democracy has been under threat and under attack. And it is up to us to be those active and engaged citizens to ensure that we get back on track. And I think that's part of the message you'll hear from both of them tonight. So be there or be square. Tune in if you're not there in person.
Or be at Axios House and avoid
the... Or be at Axios House, but tune in. Don't miss it.
So you mentioned earlier that you caught a pretty nice ride, a pretty comfy ride here into Chicago. Back in 2007 when we met, and it was in 2007 that you first met Vice President Harris. And I know that back then you were very fancy. So tell us where you met Vice President Harris.
I think I met her when she was in our office, like getting ready to make phone calls or knock on doors. And she had on gym shoes and I had on gym shoes. And she was, what struck me about her is she's already an elected official, a DA for a big city, and she was prepared to roll up her sleeves and do what everybody else was doing. And I think that was what was so remarkable about President Obama's campaign, and what I've sensed already from Vice President Harris's campaign is that you'll have right next to each other these senior seasoned elected officials and volunteers. And I think, as President Biden said last night, I'm going to be your best volunteer. And so that's the energy and enthusiasm that I saw back in '07 when I first met her, that I saw when I worked with her most closely when she was Attorney General in California. She was tenacious. She really was. When we were trying to do a settlement with the banks, she was like the last Attorney General, and she said, I think we can do more for our citizens who've been affected by these horrendous mortgages. I think we can do better by them. And she held out. And I think that's the kind of fight and tenacity that we want from our president.
And a lesson for our young guests today, she was willing to work when it wasn't fancy.
When it was not at all fancy, let me tell you, and I love Iowa, but it was not fancy because politics at the local level in Iowa is you are in people's living rooms and they invite you in their living room. You are a guest in their home, and you don't have to be all highfalutin because they want to know you. President Obama used to say, they want to kick your tires and lift up your hood and find out what you're made of. And you can't do that if you're standing up here. You've got to sit around that kitchen table and convince them that they should literally put their lives in your hands. And that takes trust.
That is a very vivid analogy with the car. I'm about to get the hook here, so penultimate question. There's been a lot of talk this week about passing the torch, but something you talk about, something the Obama Foundation talks a lot about, is passing the torch to a younger generation of leaders. How does that literally happen, and how can we help?
Well, we got to identify who those young leaders are. And I love the fact that our foundation selects these young leaders from around the world, and I get to spend time with them and hear their stories and what motivates them and invest in them. And you can do it on a macro level, but it's really rewarding if you just spend some time with somebody and say, how can I help you? And I will say leadership can be very lonely. And don't just assume because somebody has a highfalutin title that they're not lonely. And so figure out ways in which you can help those young leaders. And in this world today, they're dealing with everything from wars to climate change to this toxic environment to bullying on social media. I mean, there's a lot going on. They survived COVID. And so some of them are more fragile because of their life experiences. And so take a minute and find one that you think is a superstar, like I did 30 years ago, and stick with them, because it is extraordinarily gratifying when you see their potential reached. Thank you guys so much.
And we always, one fun thing. So one of the best memories that I have of the privilege of covering President Obama was when he picked a very nice place to summer, which was Martha's Vineyard, which was a little more comfy than Crawford, Texas, which is where his predecessor had
exactly
summered. But your favorite restaurant in the world, some of us may think that Nancy is a cartoon, but Nancy's is a restaurant. Tell us about Nancy's.
They're nodding their heads.
And how often you eat there.
Well, all right. So we just came in from Martha's Vineyard yesterday. Going back, I go to Nancy's every day. Now, the person who owns the home I live in owns Nancy, so I have a little good relationship with him. The best fried shrimp in the world. It's on the harbor in Oak Bluffs. If you ever get to Martha's Vineyard and you don't stop at Nancy's, you are going to miss a real treat. I see these smiling faces. They know what I'm talking about. It's not fancy, picnic tables, and I'm there at least twice a day. And I probably gained 5 pounds in the last month since I got there.
Thank you, Axios Chicago. Thank you, Chicago. Up next is the great Naila Boodoo. Valerie Jarrett, thanks for an amazing conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody. Thank you, guys.
It's okay. Thanks.
Mike, thank you so much. Good afternoon, everyone. We are so glad that you could join us here at Axios House in Chicago during the DNC. I'm Naila Boodoo. I'm the host and editor of the Axios weekly podcast, One Big Thing. And this next conversation is actually going to be on the podcast this week. So I'm going to ask if those in the back can quiet down a little bit, because we are about to start essentially the live taping for the podcast, which also means you should clap very loudly. As I introduce our next guest, please welcome to the Axios stage UAW President Shawn Fain. Thanks for being here. I should have had them play Nelly. That should be your new walk-in song, right?
Yeah, that seemed to go over pretty well. I don't know. I was just kind of rolling with it last night with the crowd, but it just popped in my mind. So, yeah, but a great American poet, Nellie.
So, Shawn, let's get straight into it. When we think about the rough estimates of UAW members, we know that at least a third in 2016 and 2020 voted for President Trump. You wear T-shirts that say Trump is a scab, so I think we know how you feel about the former president. Why do you think that number, though, has been so consistent among UAW membership?
I mean, the number's been consistent going back. I mean, we've got statistics going back to like 2008, and I mean it's pretty been fairly consistent throughout time. Is it's typically 65 to 32% that identify with Republican candidate. I mean, I think a lot of the I think in 2016 the appeal with Trump was simply that people were looking for something different, and he was just feeding people what they want to hear. And I think Trump is he's a con artist, in my opinion. I think he does a masterful job of telling people what they want to hear and feeding off people's frustration. But that's the one thing we've tried to do going forward is just really speak. The one comparison I do every time I speak to our members and speak to conferences is I do a speech where I talk about this isn't my opinion, this isn't party politics, this is these two people in their own words and actions. It's their body of work. And when you put the body of work side by side, it's a very telling picture for who stands with us and who doesn't. So but there's a plethora of reasons why people vote the way they do, and I mean some over say right to life issues. I mean some people just have single issue voters and things like that. So there's definitely a lot of different reasons, but overall, I mean a big majority of our members will vote overwhelmingly for Kamala Harris, and that's been the trend for decades.
So that section of your membership, do you think those votes are gettable? Like, what would you say to them to win them over?
So I think some are, and I think we are turning some people. I mean, I've seen it already.
What are you saying to them, you think?
So that's going back to the contrast that I do. I basically have a presentation I do at conferences, and literally walking them through. And as I tell them, this is not my opinion. This isn't party politics. This is these two people in their own words and actions. And when you go back to the recession, we all know the economic recession in 08, 09 was brought on by the mortgage crisis and the banks, and but the auto industry was thrown for a loop. People quit buying cars naturally because there were other issues.
Your mic up a little.
And so looking at that, I mean, at that time, Donald Trump, it's documented. There's video of it, him saying, publicly that he thinks the auto workers and the unions have been very bad for what's going on in the auto industry. I mean, we were, the auto industry was blaming our pensions. They were blaming, wages, things like that, health care, as the reason why they were in trouble. And that's a lie. It's just not true. And and then you had, President Obama, Joe Biden, that were, looking for a path forward. They gave us a path forward, to keep going, and at Chrysler particularly. And so that was one issue. I mean, you look at 2015 when Trump ran for president, he actually stated, we need to do a rotation of these good-paying jobs in the Midwest somewhere else where they pay less money, so that these workers will be begging for their jobs back at any rate. That's basically driving a race to the bottom. And you go to when he was president in 2019. He's claiming now that he's this champion for the auto worker and that he cares about working-class people, but several plants were shutting down at that time, and he did nothing to help the situation. He told workers in Lordstown, Ohio, literally told them, don't sell your houses. I'm going to bring the jobs back. And then the plant closed. Workers got sent all over the country, and and so workers were on strike at GM in 2019 when he was president. He did nothing, said nothing.
So this is all in the presentation.
Yes, and so I have slides, and it's slides of him on Fox News or different networks where he's saying these things. It's not me making this up.
So you're actually showing them.
And then I show slides of Joe Biden. Well, initially I was doing that. Now I'm showing Kamala Harris. In 2019, when we were on strike at GM, Kamala Harris was on the picket line with GM workers. We have a video we put out showing what Trump said in 19. And what Kamala Harris did in 19. She stood there, she spoke to workers on the picket line. Under the Biden administration, Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, their whole team worked with us we had a plant not far from here in Belvedere, Illinois that was closed. In our contract negotiations, we were trying to get product put there, and they went to work with us and with the company to find a way to get product put there, and they did. And so, there's new product that's committed to be placed there. There's a battery plant supposed to be built there. And so, the IRA, the CHIPS Act, all those things, Harris, Biden team, it's things to generate jobs, to create working class jobs. Donald Trump talks about creating jobs, but did nothing. Kamala Harris, Joe Biden, they walked the walk. That's why I say that.
So it's an interesting thing. I wonder how you think about misinformation or the bubbles that we're in and how we're consuming information, because it sounds like you've been very deliberate about trying to show people just sort of like this is what they're saying.
Yeah.
And do you feel like that is the only effective way to sort of counter different narratives that are out there?
I think it. So I'm like, I go back to our Big Three contract campaign and our Big Three strike. I'm a visual person. You can tell me things all day long, but when you tell me things or when I read things, I retain it. But when I can see it for myself, it helps me retain things better. So in our Big Three contract campaign, we used a lot of visuals. That the Big Three had made $250 billion in profits in the last decade, while wages remained stagnant. We actually went backwards $1 an hour in that same time frame. And so, when you put those things out there and people see it, 75% of America supported us in that fight, and for that reason, because most working class Americans, union or not, are living the same reality. We've seen this massive income inequality continue to grow, and the wealthy keep taking the profits, and the working class people that generate it keep remaining stagnant or sliding along and struggling. And so it's typically, to me, it's the same thing. We're just trying to give people visuals to actually see for themselves. This isn't just me saying this. This isn't an opinion. This is these people in their own words and actions. And to me, as I say, talk's cheap. Actions speak louder than words. And so, there are other things, media, things like that. But at the end of the day, we're bombarded with so much now in this polarizing political structure we're in right now that, it's for me, it's just, I think it's better that we put the information out there, we use facts, and we push it that way. And I've seen the effect already. It's definitely, it impacts people. So
as you're talking about a visual, I'm thinking you last night helped kick things off for the DNC. Your Teamsters counterpart, Sean O'Brien, was notably the first Teamsters leader to address the RNC, and told my Axios colleagues yesterday that he feels now that he's been ghosted by the DNC here. Do you have a problem with him addressing the RNC?
No, I don't have a problem. I personally wouldn't have, because I don't feel like the party really stands with or identifies with our principles. But, I think he was trying to address, just as you asked the first question about a percentage of our members that may vote Republican, I think he was trying to, somehow address that and look at a way to do that. But at the end of the day, I go back to 1980 when Reagan became president. The air traffic controllers, PATCO, endorsed President Reagan, and so did the Teamsters, and we saw how that worked out for labor, not real well. And to me, it's, actions go further with me, and the proof's in the body of work, and until the Republican Party or those candidates display the fact that they stand with working class people, it's going to be a struggle for me to endorse that. So, I give him credit for going into the belly of the beast and actually speaking about working class issues, but I don't really think it swayed anybody as far as.
Well, it's an interesting point, right? It was striking to me that Vice President Harris last week released a series of proposals, a $6,000 child tax credit, no taxing on tips, and that the Trump campaign is actually saying, hey, they're copying us. So regardless of how you feel about the Trump campaign, I want to ask how you feel about both parties agreeing to these proposals that could really help working class voters.
Well, that is that's a fine example. But I guess that's what I would say. That's one example you can give me of Donald Trump supporting working class people. And, you can almost say the same thing there. Like, Trump says a lot of things that he's going to do or that he supports, but he had the opportunity to do that when he was president, and what did he do with it? So it's shallow with me. The fact that Harris and them saw that and adopted that, view it how you want to view it. At the end of the day, I know one thing: workers in that industry have been left behind. They are scraping to get by. My daughter's a chef, by the way, and has two degrees: culinary arts, pastry arts. But she's been working as a chef for 9 years now, and doesn't make really good wages, and it's a struggle. So I know in that industry what people go through, and it's important we have that issue addressed. So I'm glad that both candidates agreed with that, but there's a hell of a lot more work to be done than just that. I mean, we've got to create, a system. We used to manufacture everything in this country, the clothing industry. We used to make, in the early 70s, we manufactured 96% of the clothes were made here in America that we sold here. Now it's like less than 3%. We've had whole industries disappear. The auto industry, we've lost millions of jobs, with these trade agreements and things. So, and that's where, I just look at, who's creating jobs right now. Under the IRA, the Inflation Reduction Act, the hundreds of millions of dollars, hundreds of billions of dollars that the Biden administration, Harris administration have put into this economy. And there's, over 30 battery plants there's 6 currently operating in the United States. There's upwards of 30 when they're completed in the next 5 years that'll be running in this country. I mean, that's how you create jobs in America. And those are the standard-setting jobs. We bargained a great contract at the Altium battery plant in Lordstown, Ohio, just recently. So we're looking at setting the standard. And they put provisions in that in order to do that. So, that to me is what matters. I mean, they're bringing manufacturing back. Trump talked about bringing manufacturing back when he was president, did nothing. Biden, Harris have done that.
As we're talking about jobs, I wanted to ask you, you addressed last night that Stellantis was going back on a production commitment they had made. This is a mid-sized truck factory here in Belvidere, Illinois. I know Stellantis did respond this morning and said that it was critical that the business case for all investments be aligned with market conditions.
Yeah.
But then they said they stand firmly behind the commitments they've made. Is that good enough for you?
No, because they don't. First off, they've backed the commitment up to our next contract after our contract expires. So if you
what year is that?
2028.
Okay,
So
which is when the plant was supposed to be built by.
the plant is supposed to be built by it's supposed to be operational by 2027.
Okay.
Right now, they've backed it up past that expiration. So when it's into our next contract, literally, if you bargain for something in a contract and it doesn't take place, you bargain for nothing. You're not honoring that agreement. So we expect them to honor the commitment they made. And it's interesting to me when they bring up this market conditions situation right now. I don't know if anybody paid attention, but GM just made $4.4 billion this last quarter. Ford's doing well. And the interesting part is market conditions apply to working class people and to the workers, auto workers, when the company wants to find an excuse to not honor their commitment. But it sure as hell didn't apply to Carlos Tavares when he gave himself a 56% pay increase this last year from $22 million to $39.5 million. So if market conditions are bad, how the hell can he afford to more than double his salary?
You have talked about this campaign being a war on corporate greed, something Kamala Harris has started saying as well. Do you feel like you can maybe claim credit for her incorporating that exact language into her stump speeches now?
Look, I mean, we've been very open about that for the past year and a half and been talking about it a lot. I mean, I hope, I'd like to say we've had some influence in that, but I just believe, I look at, and I say this every time I speak, I look at Kamala Harris and Tim Walz, I look at working class people, I know where I came from, and working class people can look at them and they can see themselves. I can't look at a Donald Trump and see myself. I'm sorry. I mean, I wish I wish I was born into that kind of wealth and I just had everything handed to me, I guess. But I probably don't.
Do you?
I guess I probably don't. I'm glad that I had the struggle I've had because, I mean, it's made me who I am. So, but I think that's the difference. Kamala Harris, talks about her first job at McDonald's. I mean, that matters. It builds character. It teaches you the value of work and what people go through in that struggle. And, Tim Walz as a teacher. I mean, we've seen the teaching profession. Public education's been attacked. It's been decimated for decades in this country. And it should be one of the highest paid professions we have. And it's insane to me that we talk about how we value people, we value education, but we don't put any value into education. And my sister was a school teacher for 20 plus years. She left the profession because she had 3 kids. She could not afford to live. And it's a shame. They kept cutting. And finally she's like, I can't do this anymore. I cannot afford to live. And so, I believe people look at Kamala Harris, they look at Tim Walz, and they can see themselves and they see, people that understand our issues and understand the struggle, and they want to fix that. They want to work on that. And you're going to get someone that's been there and done that is sure as hell going to do a lot better job of representing people than someone that's never been there and has no idea what the hell it's even like.
Shawn, that said, how do you see organized labor holding a Harris-Walz administration accountable for rebuilding, as you're saying, the system where teachers are valued, where people are paid living wages?
Well, I mean, I think it's a start. I mean, we also have to elect a Congress that's willing to, pass legislation. I mean, unfortunately with, ALEC and groups like that basically, cram horrible laws for people, through their Republican legislators at the state level and elsewhere down our throats. We've got a battle ahead of us, but we've got to go to work. This isn't just about electing the president and vice president. It's about electing senators and representatives and even to the state level. And working class people, we've really got to, I believe organized labor's role in this is we have to organize people. We have to bring people together, and we have to get them on point with what the issues are. Because I said this last night, and I say this a lot when I speak also. I mean, the one thing that the corporate class has done very well, and the billionaire class is they play the oldest game in the book very well, divide and conquer. They divide us over, race, over who somebody loves. This manufactured border crisis they talk about now that I'm sorry. I mean, I look at that. I don't see rapists and murderers and invaders. They're not invading our nation. They're human beings. And they're destitute and desperate human beings. And I see those people, and I see my grandparents. My grandparents went through a Great Depression, and my grandma Fain was left in an orphanage with her siblings during the Depression by their parents because they couldn't take care of them. They were dispersed, different places. My grandparents, when I was raised, I mean, they moved north. They migrated north from Tennessee and Kentucky, and they got jobs at GM and Chrysler, and it changed their lives. They lived the American dream. And so I look at those people at the border, and I don't see invaders and rapists and murderers. I see destitute and desperate people, just like my grandparents were. The only difference is they're crossing a federal line to try to find a better life. And and that's the other thing about, I didn't talk about this, but I wish I could have had time to do it last night. But we got a political party that wants to hold up the Bible, and they want to wrap themselves in the American flag and talk about patriotism, and every damn thing they do is against that. I'm sorry, but you don't tell me about religion.
Which is something that you have, I mean, especially during the strike, you were very vocal about your faith. Why is it important for you to incorporate that into your work?
Well, I believe the Democrat Party should embrace it. I believe, I think some people are don't like talking about religion. I think it makes some people uncomfortable, but look.
But you've talked about like your daily devotionals.
I do a daily reading every day when I first thing I do when I get up, I do a daily reading and I pray. And I'll tell you, I have a very strong faith, but to me, that's the irony of this party that wants to claim that they are the party of religion. I mean, literally, every religion I know of is founded in one principle: it's love of your fellow human being. And I mean, in the Christian Bible that I read, I mean, when Jesus was tested by the lawyer, what's the most important commandment, and he says, love the Lord your God with all your heart, all your soul, all your mind. And the second one is like it, love your neighbor as yourself, meaning love your fellow human being. I don't know how anyone can claim that is their faith, that is their belief, and they sit here and call destitute and desperate people rapists and murderers and stay the hell out of my country. That is not a Christian thing to do. And so every religion I know of is founded in that core belief that it's founded on love of your fellow human being. So and that to me is what this is all about. We're on this earth. Our job, my job as a labor leader, is to unite people, is to bring people together, it's to lift everyone up. Not three people at the top, three families at the top in America have as much wealth as the bottom 50% of Americans. That is a crisis. That's the crisis. There's not a border crisis.
So I've noticed that the UAW has a recent solidarity project, as we're talking about this, with Mexican auto workers. You all have issued statements of support for Brazilian workers. Is that what's behind that?
You bet. No, yeah. We want to lift the standard up everywhere. We're working with unions all over the globe right now. But, obviously, with Mexico and what's went on there, the exploitation of those workers, there's seeding factories there that pay workers $2 a day. It's insane. And they bust these workers in. I go back to my grandpa from Tennessee, my grandpa Carter, and his dad was a miner in early 1900s in Tennessee. And, they got paid in company script. They didn't get paid money. They got paid in company script. And it was good at the company store. I mean, you lived in company housing. And if you didn't do what the hell you were told, you were kicked off. I mean, you look at what's going on in Mexico. These factories that the big three and other companies locate down there, they bus workers in. They feed them a meal and stuff. But their life is completely controlled by the company. And they're paying them, $3, $5, things like that a day or, a week. And it's insane. And it's criminal. So we are engaging some of the new labor unions down there and working with them and trying to support them. I know some of the unions, Unifor in Canada are also, and Industrial from Europe are also working with us. And so we're actually assigning organizing staff down there to help these workers do better.
Shawn, we're almost out of time, but I would be a bad former labor reporter if I didn't ask you how the organizing campaign is going at Tesla.
Yeah, so I mean, literally, it's not just Tesla. It's all the original equipment manufacturing companies, all the non-union auto companies, but also, as I said earlier, we just got a great contract at the Ultium battery plant in Lordstown, Ohio, and we're looking to take that throughout the battery industry. So there's literally 26 to 28 more battery plants being built right now or coming online right now. So we're organizing like hell all over this country. So, obviously Tesla's in our sights, but I think everybody's craving that fight. But
are you?
I mean, we want to look. We just want to bring justice to workers everywhere.
Right.
I mean, that's what the fight is.
What do you think about when it's like you're taking on Elon Musk?
Well, I don't look at it that way because I don't. It's not. This isn't about me, and it's not about Elon Musk. I know Musk and Trump and people like that. They want to make everything about themselves. This is about people, and it's about humanity, and it's about leaving this world better than we find it. So to me, this it's not about me, and I don't view it that way. So I'm not doing this to take on Elon Musk. I'm doing this. We're doing this to try to bring justice to workers and just a better standard of living, and that's what it's all about. I mean, work brings dignity to people. We hear a lot in this country. Every time there's a shooting or something bad happens, they always want to talk about mental health. We use that as a phrase now, the mental health issue, but we don't ask what is a contributing factor to this issue. And we've got to get deep into this and start talking about the fact that, when people go to work, they go to work, it gives them a sense of dignity. It gives them a sense of independence. But when you're working 2 and 3 jobs and you're scraping to get by paycheck to paycheck, when you're working 7 days a week, 12 hours a day, and at the end of the week you can't pay your bills, there's a sense of hopelessness people get. And so to me, this whole mental health crisis we talk about, I think that's just a catchphrase anymore, and we're not really digging into the causes behind that. So I think we really got to talk more about that, and I think that's what you want to solve a lot of problems in this country, drug abuse, alcohol abuse, spousal abuse, crime. When people have good jobs and they can live a decent life, those numbers will go down. I mean, when they have a sense of hopelessness, I mean, those things all go up. And so that to me is our mission, is to bring hope to people and turn this situation around. We have the means to do it. There's obscene wealth in this nation. We're the wealthiest nation in the world, and there's no excuse that working class people are having to live like they have to live in this country.
Shawn, thank you for taking time to be with us today. At Axios, we like to end on one fun thing. So I just want to ask about who picks the T-shirt selection every day?
So we so the Trump is a scab thing. I started talking about that quite a while back, and I actually wanted to make a T-shirt that said Trump is a scab.
Oh, so that was your idea to make the T-shirt?
So that was my idea. The shirt was, but we just came up with some more themes. For the week, we'll be wearing a different T-shirt each day. So we'll switch. I don't really like having Trump in big letters on my body. It's kind of hard. So we'll be switching that up tomorrow. You'll see bigger Harris letters the next few days. So.
All right. UAW President Shawn Fain, thank you so much for being with us. And for all of you here, please stick around. We've got a couple more events this afternoon here at Axios House. Arizona Congressman Ruben Gallego, California Senator Alex Padilla, New York Governor Kathy Hochul. So please stick around and have a great afternoon.